Well, joint enterprise sounds like a business model.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've come across, because a lot of young people, if you say joint enterprise to them, they go, I don't know what you're talking about. But I honestly think that young people need to understand the implications of what joint enterprise is and how it can affect their lives. Because you just showed me how many cases have you got here?
Well, we are currently supporting over 800 prisoners. But it's probably a bit higher than that because we release people in the system. But probably about 70% of them are BAME, so it is definitely joint enterprise, definitely targets certain communities, is used on certain individuals or groups. I mean, the way you can get a collective criminalisation of a group is by using something called joint enterprise, or was. They've now changed that to, if they're calling it parasitic accessorial liability, right? So they're trying to make it quite complicated language.
Yeah.
So accessorial liability is what they're using now. But what they were using over the last 10, 15 years very, very heavily was joint enterprise. Yeah. And what they needed to do was prove that two or more individuals had the same intention and foresight as the person who carries out the crime. So most of the people we're supporting have been convicted of murder. And they haven't necessarily murdered.
Done.
No, a lot of them are not at the scene. A lot of them are at the scene but have left the scene when something else, the altercation leads into something else. A lot of them have received a phone call earlier in the day, so that can bring them into the joint enterprise because you knew what was going to happen. It was going to take place
that day.
A lot of them are very young, vulnerable people who have no indication that a crime has happened anyway, but they can then say, well, you're a part of that group, or they'll use the gang narrative.
Yeah.
That's really to bring
tie you into that.
And often, I call them the Caspers, because they're the friendly white ghost. Often the person they've got the least evidence on becomes someone very high up in the chain, because they need to get that person so they can get other people that they know. And it's a way of criminalising large groups, and it's a very easy way of getting something as serious as a homicide conviction, murder conviction for something you didn't know was going to happen.
Because before I came across here today, I didn't realise how deep this thing is. I mean, I'm just looking at all of these individuals here. These are all people that you're working with. You're working with their families, and there's just a wide section of people. They're mostly young. Yeah, I can see mostly young people.
Yeah, this young girl is named Emma, and that's Charlotte, and so it's not just boys and it's not just men. It's like children. The youngest was 13. That's her, but she was in a flat when someone has beaten up somebody else. She's very, very vulnerable. She was 16. She was being sexually abused by a stepfather. So she was they sent her to a home with only men in it. Anyway, so this man has told her to drive him and the guy he's beaten up to a forest. So vulnerably, she does that because she's actually she's really petite and she looks about 12. And she does that, and the next day she can't wrestle with her conscience because she doesn't know what's happened to the guy that he's dumped it or he's taken into the forest. So she goes to the police. She's serving 20 years. Wow. She goes to the police to do the right thing. So the thing where young people have got to be aware of, and I'm not going to say you be careful who you hang around with, because I wouldn't do that. I've got young sons. They choose their friends, and you always choose your friends wisely. But if you do get arrested under this spurious umbrella of a collective accessorial liability, and you know you're not guilty of the index offence, it's quite difficult, and I don't want to be the voice of doom, but it is quite difficult to get yourself out of it, because the police will use evidence like cell site evidence. They will use anything like if you've got a bandana. The main one you've got to be really careful of is if you've done a YouTube footage and you're going, get the feds, or making any kind of...
It's all evidence.
That is evidence. There's been two big cases, one in Moss Side and one again in London just recently. The prosecution have opened up on YouTube footage evidence.
And actually shown that YouTube.
And you might not be even in there. You've got guys in the dock that are not in the footage, but that doesn't matter, because all you're trying to tell this jury, who do not believe the CPS lie, who do not believe the police lie, is that you're part of that group because you know them. And it's just scary.
I'm just blown away.
I know.
And some of these cases I've seen them in the newspaper, and it's, just to know that you're actually working with them and they're there because of joint enterprise is what's frightening for me. So if you have something to say to You know, I'm not even going to start on the parent shit. I think young people need to know what joint enterprise is and not understand it, overstand it, because this could be the difference between you serving, what's one of the longest sentences you've got there?
40.
40 years.
Yeah.
It's serving 40 years.
Yeah, we've got a guy who's serving 32 years for making a phone call from prison. He's phoned his brother outside of prison. His brother then is picked up for a shooting that he couldn't possibly have done, and the boy gets 32 years for that phone call.
So if there's anything you do take from this short video here, this awareness video, is that this thing called joint enterprise is a very serious thing. There are lots of young people, you know, over 700 cases here being dealt with, and literally by people that they haven't carried out the act, they were just associated to the act. And so in terms of you as a viewer, being a parent watching this or a young person watching this, do your research on joint enterprise, contact organisations like this. They're more than happy to give you the information that you need. But the one key thing is this: learn and understand what joint enterprise is, because it could save your life.